Today's guest is Ryan Pyle. And if you're a writer who's ever waited for permission from an agent, a network, a studio, anyone to say yes, this one's for you. So at a time when his career was collapsing, Ryan decided to make an adventure TV series in China, one of the most heavily militarized countries in the world. It's a decision that changed his career and his life forever. So this is part one of a two-part conversation about what happens when you stop asking and give yourself permission to create. Here we go. All right. This is the Story Series, the podcast for writers who break the rules. Ryan Pyle, welcome back.
How you doing, buddy? It's great to be back.
I'm great. It's awesome to talk to you. This episode, we're going to do a deep dive into a TV show in particular that you put together called Tough Rides China.
So this idea of circumnavigating China by motorcycle really came about as a way of me reconnecting with my brother. And my brother had just sold a business. He'd exited a business and was going to take a year off traveling the world. And I was kind of thinking, okay, this is my chance to do maybe something with my brother and set myself in another career path, moving away from photography. So like all these undertones were kind of going on. And then in 2010, in March, my brother and I decided to meet up in New York. So I was there to kind of take stock of what the photography industry was doing at the moment. And my brother came down from Toronto to hang out for a few days. And we were both just looking for a change. We both wanted to kind of do something different. And we had both just been big fans of Ewan McGregor and Charlie Borman. And they had done their long way round where they went from London to New York through Siberia. And we were huge fans of them. And you know, their project was obviously very commercial. Ewan is a huge movie star. But we loved the spirit behind it. And we were like, well, what if we tried to do something similar, but we just did it in one country? But what if that country was just interesting enough to be able to carry a story?
And you were living in Shanghai at the time. And how much of China had you seen before? Because you were living there for about 8 years before you started this motorcycle trek.
Yeah.
How much of China did you know?
So I had been detained or arrested in every province in China already by that stage.
As a photographer?
Yeah, with the New York Times. Because every time we traveled somewhere, we were followed. You know, like one time we were locked in our hotel rooms because they didn't want us to leave our hotel room to meet someone who was going to tell us something embarrassing about what was going on in that province.
In other words, you were very familiar with China before setting out on the motorcycle ride. But in contrast, your brother, his name is Colin.
Colin, yeah.
Had he ever been to China before that?
So I got married in China back in the day. So my brother had been to Shanghai just for my wedding previously. Okay. And then he'd never been back. So he'd never seen the countryside, never really experienced everything. And I had been at this stage, I'd been all through Tibet. I'd been hiking, climbing all around China. And then again, my journalism work had taken me pretty much everywhere.
So it was kind of a natural, and you were, of course, living there at the time too. So it was just natural to say, hey, what if we did this around China? You know it, your brother doesn't. It's a chance to reconnect and also show him the rest of the country, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was more like desperation. Like I really felt like I needed to do something quite unique. And I felt like, you know, riding a motorcycle around Tanzania or South Africa or Argentina or Brazil. I did Brazil later, but China was like the one thing I knew would probably get some attention. And it was also really useful that I knew it backwards and forwards.
And when you said attention, had anyone attempted that before?
Not to our knowledge.
Right.
And actually, like even Ewan and Charlie at one stage, they were thinking about trying to go through China and it was just too much of a headache. So they went around it. You know, they went into Russia and then Kazakhstan and then Mongolia, you know, and they really went out of their way to avoid China just because it was so difficult. And I was like, wow, this is cool. Like we could do something quite unique here, like that other people feel is too difficult.
Yeah, and you described this moment where I think do you go into an Apple store and you go on Google Maps and you literally see if you can map out the entire trip and how many kilometers, how many miles it is and how many days it would take. Is that right?
Absolutely. So I remember everything about this moment. So this is March 2010. You know, I'm at my absolute lowest as a professional photographer. My entire income's kind of been destroyed. The whole industry's shifting. My brother is coming off of a high. He's selling out of his business and he's about to take a year And I'm just sitting there like, I really like I want to make TV. And we're sitting there going like, yeah, we should try to do like an adventure. You should do an adventure. And I was like, yeah, we should do an adventure. It's like, I should ride a like, what about you? Like we could ride a motorcycle together. And we're sitting there. And I remember, not a sponsor, we're eating Subway sandwiches. We're sitting on the rocks in the north or in the west corner of Central Park. And then we're like, okay, like we should ride motorcycles around China together. And it's like, okay, when should we do this? And he's like, well, I'm going to take my year off. I'm going to start here. We could start with this trip and then I can reconnect with his wife and they can do the rest of their trip. They were going to travel all around the world and stuff like that. And I was like, okay. And then we walked from where we were having lunch to Fifth Avenue in Central Park South, and that the southwest corner there. And that's where the famous Apple store is.
Yep.
So we went down the stairs to the, B1 or whatever it is, where all the machines are. We got on Google Maps. And we were like, if we just go to here, to here, to here, to here, to here. And we were like, okay, this is about, 12, 13, 14,000 miles, depending on which route we take. And it was about 19,000 kilometers. And we were like, yeah, this can be done. And I was like, I've been there and I've been there and I know what that looks like. And I've got friends there. And I was like, this could be really interesting. So we left each other. We were only together for 2 or 3 days. I went back to Shanghai. He went back to Toronto. And we were like, okay, let's give this like 30 days to like marinate. Like, is this still a good idea after 30 days? And then after that, we gave ourselves like another 2 or 3 weeks to like convince our wives at the time. Like he's still married. I ended up getting divorced. Not coincidence. No coincidence. Maybe a coincidence. I don't know. But it was it was tough on everyone, I suppose. But yeah, so we gave ourselves a bit of time to see if we could convince our better halves, to put this into reality. And that was a big test too.
Talk to me about, you decide to sit down and plan out this trip. What does it actually look like? What is your process like? In our last conversation, you described yourself as very OCD, working everything out as possible in advance. What do these plans look like?
I would take a section of our journey. So I knew I wanted to circumnavigate China counterclockwise. And for those people who don't understand this, Shanghai is on the east coast of China. So we were going to go north up to Beijing, up to the border with North Korea. And then from there, we were going to go all the way west to the border of China and Pakistan. And then we were going to go south to Mount Kailash and onto the border of China and Nepal and China and India. And then from there, go back, to southern China, it's near the border of Hong Kong, and then back north up to Shanghai. So I kind of broke that into, 5 or 6 parts. Okay, what's this northern stretch going to look like? What road do we need to be on? Where can we stay that night? What's option A? What's option B? How far do we think we can go every day? And then are there any tourist attractions or anything, of significant importance that shows off kind of China's diversity and what makes China interesting? Is there anything to see in that area?
So yeah, you're thinking of it in terms of just how am I going to do this? And also, what is it going to look like on film?
Yeah, completely. Like, how are we logistically going to move 2 motorcycles and a support vehicle through this part of China? And is there anything we want to film apart from just chaos on the road?
Right.
Do we have to visit a museum? Like, in Inner Mongolia, when we were going through the grasslands, we visited this like very kind of pretty entire complex that was kind of celebrating Genghis Khan. And so that was one thing like I really wanted to see. So, we had things like that along the way that we stopped and enjoyed.
And why was it important to go counterclockwise?
Just for the seasons.
Seasonal. Okay.
Yeah. And also to like, it is pretty much entirely seasonal.
Yeah.
And
because you're covering 60 days. That was at least the projection, right?
Yeah.
So that is a change of season.
Right? A lot. Yeah. And too, like we were at altitudes from sea level to 20,000 feet above sea level on motorcycles. So of course the weather is going to change a lot. And I knew that because I'd been all through Tibet as a photographer and I'd been all through Xinjiang as a photographer. And I knew that like November, you don't want to be out there, because it's really, really cold. And of course you can get snow and ice and motorcycles just don't work in snow and ice.
Right. And so still in the pre-production phase, you're figuring out the plan, the logistics. What are you thinking of in terms of gear?
We only had enough money for one cameraman and one camera. So, and we had a few GoPros and things like that on the motorcycle. I don't even think they had GoPros in 2010. I think this was like pre-GoPro. We had another company where we bought like a helmet cam and something for the bike. They weren't GoPros. I can't even remember the name of them actually. But we had to figure out like how to just film it. And I just remember like the budget was pretty limited. And I remember, the first thing I did was I had a chat with my good friend, Chad Ingram. And Chad was a brilliant photographer, a still photographer based in Shanghai. And he was also noticing at the same time as me, like things in the still photography world were getting quite difficult. And the value of a photo was rapidly decreasing as everyone had cameras on their phones. And, just the industry was changing so much. And he really wanted to get into video storytelling as well. So I said, like, look, you want to get into video storytelling. I want to make this motorcycle show around China. Let's work together. And he said, great. So I bought a camera. He figured out how to use it literally like 2 weeks before we left.
Crazy.
It was amazing. And I only bought the camera like 2 weeks before we went. And he was just spent 2 weeks like playing with it and figuring it out. But he's so creative and so artistic, and his framing and the way he kind of goes about storytelling is so professional.
And so at this point you have one camera, you have a couple GoPro type cameras for you and your brother Colin to wear.
Yeah.
You have a support vehicle,
which was my car.
Right. And you had one driver who I think started off as Ted, and then you would have different drivers. But
Ted was my best friend. Yeah. Ted was my best friend, and he was also up for a bit of a vacation. And Ted, the great thing about Ted was he spoke fluent Chinese. So even though he was a big white guy, he spoke fluent Chinese. So the driver for our support vehicles along the way was also our local producer, fixer, translator.
Right.
And then Chad was next to him.
So 4 of you.
Yeah.
You, your brother, Chad, and Ted. Okay. Yeah. And we should also point out at this time in China, and you really touch on this a lot, you have unusual bikes for China.
Yeah. So when we wanted to do a motorcycle trip around China, we were like, okay, well, let's use a Chinese-made bike because China makes everything. And there were a few Chinese-made motorcycles, but they weren't really high quality. They were motorcycles for the cities. They were small engine, like 150cc, 50cc, whatever. But China didn't really make a reliable, high quality 600, 800, 1000cc motorcycle because those are used for long distance travel. And in China, that mentality of long distance travel by motorcycle wasn't something you did. You could take the train. If you have money, you buy a car. You don't ride a motorcycle from one city to another. It's like that's something a farmer would do, and a farmer would be like a lower class, from a city person. So from an urban dweller to a rural dweller. So there's all these stereotypes in China. So it's like if you're wealthy, you don't ride a motorcycle.
Yeah.
You buy a car. So this concept in China hadn't really arrived. So at that stage, we're like, okay, so we need foreign made motorcycles. Okay. And at that time, China was only allowing 2 foreign made motorcycles to be sold in China. One was Harley Davidson, great company. Another was BMW, another great company. But to do the adventure part and to do the off-roading part that we wanted to do, Harley Davidson wasn't the motorcycle. So we chose to work with BMW, and I asked for free motorcycles and it wasn't possible. So I ended up having to buy 2 BMW F800 GSs in Shanghai.
It's all self-funded.
All self-funded. Yeah. We didn't get any money from anyone.
How much of the finished product do you have in your head? Like, obviously you're making a show. The story is, where you want to end up. You're going from point A, long way to point B. The kind of emotional story is you reconnecting with your brother, this kind of crossroads in both of your lives. But how much of the finished product do you kind of have edited in your head? Do you know what you want, or are you kind of like, we need footage and we'll find it later?
We need footage and we'll find it later. I had no idea if it was going to be a 40-minute documentary, a 90-minute documentary, or a 10-episode TV series. I had no idea when we left on day one.
So what was your filming plan per day? You had a certain amount of miles or kilometers that you wanted to hit each day. What was your filming goal?
So we would have days where we would stop and get off the motorcycles and do like an event. And that was like when we went to the Sun Moon Lake on the border with China and North Korea, where we got caught in the fog and we actually didn't see anything. Right. But that was like an off day. That was like an off motorcycle filming day. So on various things that I really wanted to see and I thought the audience would like, we would have days where we didn't ride and we just filmed all day, where we would do an event or visit someplace. And then we would have days where we just rode the motorcycles. So whatever we filmed that day would have to be a mix of gas stations, restaurants,
Yeah.
and whatever else crazy happened on the road.
So you are thinking, yes, footage, but also pacing, where it's like, okay, we don't want just road chaos. We want to see some sights. We want to get some of the rural, remote village life, and we want to get some restaurants. And so you're kind of thinking like, okay, well, we're going to hit some of this in each episode or however it lays out, but you want to make sure you're covering your bases, right?
Yeah, I mean, the goal when we started was really to show people a different kind of China, and it was less about us, and I think more about China. And I think that's been a theme through all of my TV shows, where I've always put the place and the nature and the history above my own personal experience.
Yeah.
And I think China really set that, because the whole goal was not for people to like watch us and be like captivated by us, because we're not famous Hollywood actors, but we were guys that really wanted to go out and show people China. And because of my photography career up until that stage, I had this really amazing access to these incredible parts of China that other people just weren't seeing. It's not stuff that was covered on CNN or Fox or whatever, BBC. And we had the chance now to go out and show people this. So the idea was to show people like the real China, or like my version of what the real China was in all these places. So of course we had to stop in all these cool places, and we had to go on these roads that would show people the different landscapes, and we had to visit a mosque and a temple and a monastery, and show people like different religions that exist in China.
Right. You early on, I think it's maybe day 5 or a couple days into it, you're at the North Korean border.
Yeah.
And you see this kind of odd Ferris wheel. There's this bridge, and then this Ferris wheel right in the distance.
Yeah, we're in Dandong. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think the Ferris wheel was in use, but can you just talk to me about that? What are you seeing? So you're on obviously the Chinese side looking into North Korea.
Yeah. So the idea was like, we wanted to fully circumnavigate China, and and in order to do that, you have to travel along all these international borders. And I hadn't really thought of what that really meant until later on in the show, like episode 2 or 3, where we got caught in Inner Mongolia and there's all these police and stuff like that. But because you're kind of circumnavigating China, a huge part of our trip, or a few days of our trip, we were along the North Korea border. And there's a river there called the Yalu River. And we stopped in this town called Dandong. And Dandong was super funny because you could sit in this hotel, and we stayed at a decent hotel that night so we could shower and wash some clothes and things like that. And and you could go up to the rooftop restaurant in this hotel, and you could look into North Korea over the Yalu River. So you're only like a couple hundred feet away from North Korea, the width of the Yalu River. And you go up this hotel, and you're looking down, and they had binoculars, and you could like look in. And then after we went down to the street level and we got close to the bridge, and we could talk to people, and everyone was kind of like looking into North Korea. So here you have this like hermit kingdom, right? Like no one knows what's going on in North Korea. No one's been to North Korea, and we're right on the border with it. And it was so cool. And the Chinese, the people in Dandong, kind of use it as a tourist attraction, that the fact that we're so close to North Korea. And actually there was one afternoon where Colin and I were like way ahead of the support vehicle or something. So we stopped and we pulled into a golf driving range, and Colin has this wicked slice, and he was trying to hit it up and over the net and slice it over the Yalu River into North Korea. But that is literally how close we were.
How aware are you of the support vehicle while you are writing?
We're always
like,
aware
of it. Like, are you like, okay, I can't go too fast. I have to make sure I'm in shot. Like, and is he leaning out the window? How is he Chad getting these shots?
Well, so we were always very conscious of the support vehicle, because if anything interesting happened to us and we weren't near the support vehicle, we wouldn't get filmed. Right. So like if we're an hour ahead of the support vehicle and there's an accident, and we stop and we're like, oh my God, look at what's going on. Like, the roads in China are crazy.
Yeah.
Right. That's a great theme that was in our show. And we had lots of traffic in other places that was fucking insane. Can I swear?
Yes.
Okay. So we were always conscious about trying to stay as close to the support vehicle as possible in order to film. And yeah, like sometimes Chad would lean out the car and get some shots if the background scenery was gorgeous. Like sometimes we were on highways and there was no traffic either way. So the support vehicle would just pull out, and we would kind of stagger ourselves, and Chad would get out and film it, hang out the window with the camera. And then other times we would stop and have like a bite to eat, or or fill up the gas tank on the side of the road, and Chad would get out and film that or ask us how we're feeling. So having the support vehicle close to us all the time was really important for the filmmaking.
Yeah. And would you ever have to go back and shoot something where it's like, oh gosh, this shot of, the sunset here would be great. Can you guys double back and go again? Or
All the time.
all the time?
Yeah, because you don't realize how great that corner looks with the lake behind you, with the sun in that perfect position until you've already done it.
Yeah.
And then he pulls, they pull over, I pull over, and I'm like, let's do it again. So he would get out, put the tripod down, maybe climb up the side of a hill, maybe stand on top of the car.
Yes.
And get a nice shot. And then Colin and I would go back and do that again.
So some of it is literally you with the producer hat going, this is a shot we're going to use.
Always. And we didn't have, like a real plan of like, what we needed to capture every day, but we knew we needed to have these big tentpole places that we were visiting, like that border with North Korea. And then we knew we needed enough riding footage to push us along. And we really needed to be able to show people how the landscape was changing, because, if you're 100 miles outside of Shanghai, the countryside looks a lot different than when you're in Tibet, 100 miles outside of Lhasa. So we really wanted to make sure we had enough riding footage to show people that not only are we moving, but the landscape is changing. And then also too, getting enough faces and people, because the people change. Like China likes to sell itself as this big, like homogeneous, singular nation with, Han Chinese people being the singular people who live there. And it's not the case. There's a ton of minorities, and they look completely different than people on the East Coast in China. So we wanted to tell the story of how the people change as we travel around China as well.
That was one of the insights from the book that seemed surprising to us, how diverse China is.
Yeah.
And okay. So you're essentially watching dailies at the end of every day.
Trying to figure out how to do it better.
How to do it better, what's working, what kind of things, and what were some of the changes that you made on the fly like that?
I think more just stopping on the road and getting our like temperature of like where we are that day. Cause I felt like that, like, cause sometimes things would happen on the bike, or sometimes things would happen with traffic, and we would just keep going. But instead, like if we saw something crazy or whatever, or if we were stopping just to have some food I just wanted the camera out as often as possible cause like when you stop on the side of a highway, you're fucking exhausted. You look terrible. You're eating Oreo cookies because that's all they sold in the gas station, and you've got some, cola or something, and you just feel awful. And it's like, that's where the camera needs to be. Because riding a motorcycle around China is really glamorous and wonderful until you realize you need to do 500 miles a day for 60 days straight. And that's not something that's comfortable. Doing 500 miles one day and then taking a few days off and then doing 500 miles another day, that's like an ideal vacation. But to wake up every day at 6 or 7 a.m., have breakfast, and then know that you're going to do 8 or 10 hours on the road is just a grind. So, and it's interesting, like the shots we got on the highway when we were stopping to eat or drink some water or whatever, we just looked worse and worse and worse the longer we got into the trip, and the hair gets longer, the beard gets bigger. It's a great barometer of like what the temperature is on the day, the temperature for us and our mood and our energy. And I love looking back at that series because, we look completely different on day 5 than we did on day 50.
That's right. Well, it also seemed there were a lot of extremes. Sometimes it would be very hot, then the rain would dump on you. There was at one point you're describing hail that's sideways and you have to hold up in some building that's half constructed and wait it out, and all these different challenges like that. One thing to touch on was, speaking of how you had motorcycles that were unusual to China, something that was unexpected was how you get fuel every day.
Yeah. So
that you didn't anticipate, right?
No, I mean, because I'd never ridden a motorcycle around China before, so I didn't understand what gas stations think of motorcycles. So China is very hierarchical. And, if you drive into a gas station with a Porsche or a luxury car of some sort, people come running up to you and they'll fill up your gas tank and all this stuff. But when you show up on a motorcycle, they won't even let you park and fill up your motorcycle using, the machine that pumps you the gas. What they do is, because they see the motorcycle as having an open engine and being quote unquote a fire risk, because if you overflow your gas tank, the gas will fall onto the engine, and they think that'll cause a fire. because the gas nozzles at the gas stations in China don't automatically shut off when the gas is full. So it can overflow. So because of that risk, they would make us fill up a teapot, literally like a teapot you would put on the stove, and they would open up the top, fill it up with gas, and then walk it back to your bike, which would be parked 100 feet away. And then you fill up over there just in case there's a fire. It won't affect the main pumps of the gas station, which I guess could make it look like some kind of Hollywood movie that just goes up in flames. But so we had to do this. So, and again, like these teapots were not big. Like, they were for scooters or for small CC motorcycles that had small gas tanks, small engines. We had these big 800 CC motorcycles, and they took a lot of fuel. So I thought like we could just pull into a gas station, use the pump, and be done in 5 minutes. But no, every time we stopped for gas, and sometimes we had to stop once a day, sometimes we had to stop 3 times a day, depending on how far we went. Each time we had to stop for gas, these teapots were universal throughout the whole country. And it took us an hour to fill up the teapots, fill up the bike, and we had to bring it back, fill it up
again. 4 times back and forth sometimes, right?
Sometimes. And then if there's a lineup and there's other people with motorcycles, then they want the thing too. Yeah. And they were getting upset that we were taking all the fuel, and then sometimes there would be a lineup ahead of us and we would have to wait, so filling up like something that should be just completely simple was a total headache.
Almost 2 hours a day is fuel.
Yeah. And that's why a lot of people don't try to film in China or don't film well in China or don't try to do anything very ambitious in China, because you can't control what's going on in China at any time. And the rules change, the roads close, the gas station policies aren't going to change.
That was, well, and we'll get there. There were military checkpoints, things like that you would almost expect. I mean, you can't be fully prepared, but just something as mundane as getting gas. That's the thing where I'm like, gosh, every single day, almost 2 hours.
Total nightmare. So Colin and I were freaking out the first few days. Like, fuck, why don't they do this? Why don't they change this? Why don't they? And then after a few days, we gave up. And then we would get to the point where like one of us would fill up the gas for both bikes and one of us would like have a total rest. And that's kind of how we started to deal with it. So like, Colin would be like, okay, this is my shift, I'll do it. And he would fill up both bikes, which would take, 30, 40 minutes sometimes. And then I would just lay on the grass or sit in a chair and just like gather my thoughts, or maybe, send some emails or something like that.
Right.
Or figure out, how far are we to the next hotel? I would do something like logically crucial.
And how reliable were the navs that you were using?
Terrible. So you got to remember 2010, like there's no Google Maps at this stage. And Garmin, they used to have these like bricks that you would put on your dashboard of your car, and they would have maps for all these different countries, but they had a map for China, but it was really limited because the Chinese government doesn't want people mapping China. They see that as a security risk, and they don't want people to know where their roads are that are next to the borders and all this kind of stuff. So we got this Garmin, and it was a nightmare to get the Garmin into China. It was a nightmare to get a map. This was before things were online and you could just download them and upload them yourself. Like, I think we actually had to get like a SIM card or like a little memory card that actually went into the back of it that had the China map on it. Like, it wasn't something that automatically updated like the way everything is now. So, and then of course, once the map was in there, it was terribly old. And, the new roads we were on, sometimes it just looked like we were going through a field, but we were on like a 6-lane expressway that just hadn't been updated. So the Garmins were really difficult to rely on. So as a backup at the gas stations, they sell these books, and these books are old paper maps of each province and, each state in China. So we would have all these books of each province, and they would have a more updated paper version. So we use those books to get around China.
But sometimes you would encounter towns that were closed to foreigners.
Yeah, so that happened a few times where we would. So the worst time this happened was after we went to the border with China and North Korea. We spent the whole day leaving there, and we just got rained on the whole day. So rain on a motorcycle is rough. It's not so safe. You get wet, you get cold, and then as it gets kind of later in the day, it gets quite dark. So we didn't. A lot of times we would have 500 miles budgeted out for travel that day, or 300 miles, depending on where we were. And we would know which hotel we wanted to stay in and stuff like that. but sometimes we would only go half the distance or 2/3 of the distance, and we'd have to pull off the highway. And the one rule we had was we never rode at night. So if the sun set at 5:30, by 4:30, we're looking for hotels.
And the reason for that is too dangerous.
Just dangerous. Yeah. Like, it's hard enough riding a motorcycle around China and filming it. We don't want to start riding at night and getting hit by shit. So that was like a rule. Like, we wanted to do something crazy and fun, but we also like tried to do it as safely as possible. I know that sounds completely absurd, but that was the case. So this one time, like, it's getting dark and it's cold and we're not at the town we need to be at. So we just pulled off the highway and went to this hotel. And the hotel, we went to kind of the nicest hotel in town, which was like a 2-star hotel. And we're like, okay, we want to stay here for one night. We'll be out in the morning. And they said, well, our town is closed. None of the hotels are allowed to have foreigners in them. And we're like, this is ridiculous. And by this time it was already dark and still raining. And it's like, well, we're not going back out onto the highway, and we're not going to the next town. So, we just basically threatened to sleep in the hotel lobby because it was too dangerous and too cold and too wet. And we were just exhausted. And eventually the police came and they allowed us to stay at the hotel under police supervision. So there was a policeman that was sitting in the hotel on the same floor as us near the elevator outside of our doors for the whole night. And we had to have dinner at the hotel. We had to have breakfast at the hotel. And then they escorted us out of town the next morning.
And what is the reason for being closed to foreigners? I remember, so we talked about this. I lived there in Beijing 2013 to 2015. And there were certain hotels in the city that were off limits to foreigners, and I could never understand why. But here it seemed like, was there a potential military risk? What was the reason?
Yeah, I think it was like, there's military bases all over China. So if you're in a town that's right next to a military base, then they'll just close the whole town to foreigners. So, they don't think twice about it. And most foreigners have no reason to go there. Like,
there's no way out usually.
Yeah. There's no tourism there. There's no international business there. So why would a foreigner have to go there?
And what are they worried about? Just a foreigner walking around and looking around and just like
talking to people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, oh, you work at a military base? Oh, there's a military base nearby. Oh, what do you do you're a missile engineer? Oh, what does that mean? Like just, you can get into all these conversations with people. And I guess that's their biggest fear. I never got any like official report on why they do that, but
right.
But that's
probably never will.
Never will. No.
Yeah. But something that kept coming up were how rules are viewed in China and how most of them, 99% of them, are unbendable.
Yeah. All of them. I mean, you can go to any country around the world. Like people who live in authoritarian countries, and China is a one-party state, and it's pretty authoritarian in many ways. They have a capitalist economy, but you don't mess with the government. And so like when the government comes out with a rule, you fucking follow it, like, or you're gonna end up in jail or whatever. So rules are not bendable, and no young girl working behind, and it's not a stereotype, but no young girl working behind a hotel front desk in a closed city where it has on the wall, like, no foreigners, is going to let a bunch of foreigners stay there. Because she's going to get fired. She's going to end up in trouble. It's going to be a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
So she just toes the line, and then they toe the line, and they toe the line.
It was a miracle that you could sleep at the hotel with a police presence outside your room. Yeah. That was the most that they were willing to bend that rule, was, okay, but we're going to have a cop sleep right outside. Yeah. Which to me was like, it sounded like a miracle. It was like, wow, they let that happen.
Yeah. Well, it's just because we fought. Yeah. Like, we spent 2 hours in that hotel lobby fighting the hotel and then fighting the police.
Yeah.
And basically, like, when they realized, like, it was 8 p.m. at night, we hadn't eaten, we were soaking wet. It was a absolutely torrential rainstorm outside, pitch black. It's like, well, we can't send these foreigners back out there, because if one of them gets hit, like, we're going to look terrible. And then that's going to be in the international news. Right. This is how people think.
And it's off the beaten town, right? Like, that was the moment you had to get special permission from the mayor. Where I was like, okay, one night, then you got to leave, police escort out. Yeah. And even then, that's a huge, I mean, that to me, it's like, I can't believe that happened. Yeah. That you got that kind of leniency, if you even call it leniency.
Yeah. And that was all Ted, actually, because, Ted came at them, and it's great that Ted, is a big white guy who speaks fluent Chinese, because he was just, he pushed all the right buttons. He's like, you're this hospitable country. China's this wonderful country that accepts foreigners, and you want to kick us out into the street in the dark, in the rain? Like, that's not the hospitable China I know. And he was just laying into their like better senses about how ridiculous this rule is.
Kind of pulling that like saving face kind of.
Totally.
Yeah, I remember when I was there, the observation was there is no gray area when it comes to negotiating. It either is or it isn't. It's a very black and white kind of country for reasons that you just mentioned. And so one thing I want to ask you that you touch on is how much your body goes through every day on making this kind of trek. How did you take care of yourself day to day?
You don't. Like, you don't. Like, all you do is like you work out, you try to be as strong and as flexible and as healthy as you possibly can before you do the trip. But then after the trip, you're a passenger, you know, on a motorcycle through China, and there's nothing you can really do about it while you're on the trip. Like, we would have, you know, like working out along the journey, no way. Like 8 or 10 hours on the bike, you're exhausted. All you want to do is eat, you know, and sleep every night. There was no working out. There was, you know, you come off the bike, you don't even want to stretch.
I was going to say, are there any stretching, or it's just a hot shower, it's meals, and it's sleep, and that's it?
You're just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And you know, like, I think I lost 20 pounds. I think Colin lost like 20-ish as well. Like, because, you know, we work out. Colin and I both played a lot of sports back in the day. Like, we played basketball. We both played rugby. So we understood the importance of fitness. So we were always pretty strong. We were always in the gym and stuff like that. But you know, 60 days on a motorcycle, and the wear and tear of being on a motorcycle is a lot. Like, you think you're just sitting there and the bike takes you, but you're fighting the wind, you're fighting bumps in the road, and mentally you're just exhausted at the end of every day because you're constantly playing defense in your brain about how to stay safe on the motorcycle. And your muscle just completely evaporates over the course of a 60-day journey where you're doing something that physical every day.
When do you start to feel like we're going to finish this? We're going to make it?
The last day or two.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it that long?
Every part of the trip, every leg of the trip, every sector of the trip that I had kind of planned out, we would have 2 or 3 really difficult parts of that journey that I didn't know if we were going to get through. You know, how does the motorcycle react in a hailstorm at 20,000 feet? I didn't know what that would do to me or the motorcycle. Like, you know, and again, this is an interesting thing too. Like, BMW would sell you the motorcycle in China, but they had no spare parts and they had no mechanic. So if part of the motorcycle broke on the journey, there was no solution in China to fix it. And Colin and I were not gifted mechanics in any way, shape, or form. So there was no way we would be able to do kind of anything more than a basic repair. Like, eventually we did a clutch. We repaired our clutch in Tibet when I blew out my clutch, and we had to figure out how to do that. And we made a bunch of mistakes in doing that. But if anything kind of bigger had broken on the motorcycles, the whole trip would be done. So it wasn't until we were like 300-400 miles away from Shanghai, you know, on the way back, you know, day 55 or 56 into the trip or whatever, where I started to feel like, holy shit, like, we're going to finish this. Like, wow. And even on the last day, I don't know if you saw the TV show or you remember the book, but even on the last day, we're like 100 miles away from my home, which is where we started and finished the journey in Shanghai. We're 100 miles away, and we had to take a ferry, and then we had to take a bridge, and then it was like a 30-mile ride back to my house. And they wouldn't let us take the ferry because the bridge on the other side was a new bridge, and they wouldn't allow motorcycles on the new bridge. So in the lineup to get onto the ferry in the morning, they wouldn't sell us a ticket. So we went to all the truck drivers who were also in line, and we said, hey, can we put our motorcycles on your truck to go onto the ferry and then across the bridge? And then after the bridge, we'll take the motorcycles off the truck and then ride home. And that's exactly what we had to do. So even the last day, and this is, you have to understand, like, we're an hour's ride away from home, from finishing this entire journey, and to go back around the ferry and the bridge to do, it was another 500-600 mile trip. Like, it was going to add another 2 or 3 days to our journey to get home, or to get to the end of the journey, if we couldn't do this little shortcut through the Bohai, or through the Shanghai, the Bay of Shanghai. So we really wanted to kind of use that shortcut, and it was really pretty as well. But just having those kind of logistical issues that didn't make any sense were very challenging. But you have to understand, like, it's a new bridge, it's a toll bridge. You know, again, most motorcycles in China are 50cc or 150cc. They don't want to have these motorcycles doing 20, 30 miles an hour next to BMWs doing 100 miles an hour. So they didn't understand that a bigger bike, bigger engine, faster. So they just have these blanket bans, no motorcycles. So even those moments right on the last day, I was losing my mind.
It never got easy.
It never got easy.
No. Do you start to feel the buzz, at least, of like, okay, but we are going to finish? Like, you're rolling those last 30 miles. Like, are you feeling like a sense of accomplishment, exhaustion, all the above?
All the above. It's a smorgasbord of emotions and feelings, right? Like, you're kind of shaking because you're so excited. Like, holy cow, like, everyone said we weren't going to do it and we did it. And my brother and I managed to do the entire trip without arguing once, like, we really bonded and really came together as a team to do something really hard. And that's something kind of I'm most proud of. Because it was funny, like, when we, just as a little aside, our relationship on the journey improved dramatically. And we really came together in a really positive way. And when we were looking for an editor and we were looking for a broadcaster to do the journey with, or to broadcast the show with, the first thing they wanted was like, okay, like, how many times did you guys fight? And we even hired an editor to do like a little 2-minute or 3-minute teaser to try to sell it to broadcasters. And this editor, all she did was she picked out the worst moments of the journey and edited it in a way that looked like we were fighting, and we never did. So right away, like, in the post-production, we knew that was not a direction we wanted to go in, because it just was disgusting. And I don't blame the editor, and the broadcasters have their own agendas, which I think are all wrong anyways. But
it's inauthentic.
Completely. But that's what sells. So that, they were just thinking about ratings. And then, so that, based on how great our relationship was and how much we came together to do that journey, I didn't want to have anything negative in that front. So we went in a different direction editing wise, but it was so nice that we, managed to complete that journey, managed to come together and do something really difficult. And again, that last like 30 minutes on the bike, to back to home where we started and finished, that was just electric. Like, and there was also, there's also challenges in the home, if you have a partner and you're going to go off on a 60-day trip and you're going to spend, family resources to go and try to start a new career or something like that, like, there's going to be doubts. Maybe your husband or wife isn't going to be as supportive as you would have liked. Maybe there's going to be concerns about the budget. Maybe we spent too much here, not enough there, whatever. And maybe your own partner doesn't even think you're going to do this amazing thing. So there was always these communications and challenges and pressure to do it, pressure to be safe. Like my mom, like, Ryan, you took your brother around China and he crashed, and now, his life is completely different in a negative way because of what you did, to him in China or something like that. So those kinds of things, like, definitely weighed on me a lot.
Yes.
Yeah. We wanted to be as safe as we could. We wanted to have as much fun as we could, but these things were, and slowly as we got back to Shanghai, this was all starting to just shed itself out, and I could just start to relax. And, but then again, that's where you have accidents, right? Like, you have accidents within 5 miles of your home, because when you're coming home, you take the foot off the gas mentally and
let
then
your guard down.
So I was super nervous about just making sure I stayed as focused as I could.
In some ways, the journey isn't done, because now we're in post-production. You have all this footage. What do you do next? What is your plan? Hey, before you go, thank you for listening. If you want more episodes like this, make sure to hit that follow or subscribe button. And while you're at it, grab my free guide, The Rule Breaker's Guide to Finding Your Creative Voice. It's a brutally honest roadmap I put together, built from the lessons, mistakes, and breakthroughs I've collected along my journey as a writer. You can download it for free at storyseriespodcast.com. See you in the next one.